Hey everybody, Qroo here. Welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to address a recent question that I got from one of our viewers, and she asked that if you have a clause that begins with if, si, in Spanish, is that going to trigger the subjunctive? I get this question a lot, and the reason being that the subjunctive is often described as being used whenever there's some uncertainty. So take a look at this English sentence. If you want to go to the beach, I'll go with you. If we were going to translate this into Spanish, well, if we're going by the uncertainty definition, that certainly doesn't sound very certain, right? Maybe the person will go, maybe they won't. So I can see where some people be like, okay, that sounds like the subjunctive. So now take a look at this sentence. If I were rich, I would buy myself a yacht. Now in my mind, this one seems a lot more certain than the first one because I would definitely buy that yacht. So that brings us back to our question. Does the use of the word if, si, trigger the use of the subjunctive mood? And the answer is, sometimes. I know that wasn't a very helpful answer, but don't worry. I'm going to show you how to easily know when to use the indicative and when to use the subjunctive correctly. And you're going to have this down pat by the end of the video. All I ask in exchange is that you take the time to hit that like button so you don't forget later. All right, let's get started. First of all, let's break our if statements into two different categories. Our first category are the if statements that are possible or even probable. If you want to go to the beach, I'll go with you. If you want another drink, order it. If we stay home tonight, I want to eat chicken. Now you might be thinking, are those all possible or probable? Well, take a look at those sentences and what do they all have in common? The one thing they do all have in common is that the first clause is in the present tense. Then the second clause of the sentence is either in the present tense or the future tense. With if statements like these, you will always, and I'm stressing always, use the indicative, also known as the plain old present tense, after the word if, right? Si. All right, so let's translate those. If you want to go to the beach, I'll go with you. Si quieres ir a la playa, iré contigo. See? Plain old present tense. If you want another drink, order it. Si quieres otra bebida, pídela. So, quieres is in the present indicative, the plain old present tense. Pretty easy, right? If we stay home tonight, I want to eat chicken. Si nos quedamos en casa esta noche, quiero comer pollo. Both clauses in that one are in the present tense. Nos quedamos and quiero. That isn't too tough, right? And that's because we're actually using the same tenses in English too. So we're using the present tense in English or the future, we're just using the present tense or the future and just translating that way. So this is one of those times when knowing English is actually helping you speak Spanish correctly. That brings us to our second category of if statements, and these are the hypothetical if statements. Take a look at these sentences. If I were rich, I would buy myself a yacht. If it were possible, I would love to live in Italy 3 months a year. If I'd been born in Denmark, I would speak Danish. So what do you notice about these? Well, take a look at the first clause. These are actually all in the English past subjunctive. And the verb in the second clause is in the English conditional tense, right? Although you may not have realized that that was the English subjunctive because, well, people rarely mention the subjunctive in English. But the conditional part, well, you should know that well. That's basically any time you say, would do something. Well, in Spanish, we're going to be using the same tenses mood. The past subjunctive, which is known as the imperfect subjunctive in Spanish, and the conditional. Let's translate those sentences to see what they look like. If I were rich, I would buy myself a yacht. Si fuera rico, me compraría un yate. Take a look at the first clause, fuera, fuera, and that is the imperfect subjunctive of the verb ser. Take a look at the second clause, me compraría. I would buy myself. Compraría is in the conditional. That's from the verb comprar. If it were possible, I would love to live in Italy 3 months a year. Si fuera posible, me encantaría vivir en Italia 3 meses al año. First clause, fuera, still using ser, right, in the imperfect subjunctive. In the second clause, encantaría is in the conditional. And a lot of times when we say we really like something or want to do something, in Spanish, we're going to be using terms like me gusta or me encanta. Or in this type of construction, me gustaría, I would like, I could say, me gustaría vivir en Italia 3 meses al año. I would like to live in Italy 3 months a year. Or me encantaría vivir en Italia 3 meses al año. I would love to live in Italy 3 months a year. Let's go look at the next one. If I'd been born in Denmark, I would speak Danish. Si yo hubiera nacido en Dinamarca, hablaría danés. Here, hubiera is in the subjunctive, and it comes from the verb haber. In the past, this is actually called the pluperfect subjunctive when we do these phrases with haber. And I don't know why they do that, why they differentiate, but they just do. But don't let these grammatical terms, confuse you or anything. Just think of it as the past subjunctive. So the key to translating the type of sentences that I've shown you today is actually to think in English and what verb tenses and moods we're using in English. So if the sentence you're creating in your head in English has would do something in the second clause, you know to use the construction imperfect subjunctive with the conditional, right? All right. Now, if the problem you're having is conjugating the verbs either in the imperfect subjunctive or the conditional, you can always look at wordreference.com. You can check all of the conjugations for absolutely any verb that you pull up. It's super useful. All right, so this wasn't too tough, right? It really just comes down to paying attention to your English, and all the clues you need are in your English. So take a look at these two sentences. If Juan wanted to know what happened yesterday, I would tell him. And if Juan wants to know what happened yesterday, I will tell him. But only one will use the subjunctive. Well, the imperfect subjunctive to be precise. And do you know which one that is? Remember, think English. Did you already identify it's the first one? Nice job. So how do we translate that? If Juan wanted to know what happened yesterday, si Juan quisiera saber lo que pasó ayer, I would tell him. Se lo diría yo. So in that one, quisiera is in the subjunctive, right? That comes from querer. And you may notice that I have the little lo que in there. We talk about lo que a lot, right? Remember that which happened yesterday, lo que? That's a super useful one. In the second clause, that is in the conditional. Se lo diría yo. You might be wondering, Paul, why'd you use yo in the second clause? Because you often leave it off. In fact, you tell us you should leave it off. Well, remember, you can leave off the subject in Spanish if it's clear from the verb conjugation or the context who you're talking about. And it's not necessarily clear right here because the conjugation in the conditional for the first person, diría, which is exactly the same as the third person, diría. So I want to put in the yo just to make it clear. If Juan wants to know what happened yesterday, I will tell him. This one is going to be in the indicative, right? This is present tense in the first clause. We got future popped in the back. Si Juan quiere saber lo que pasó ayer, se lo diré. Now, on this one, I didn't put the yo. I could put the yo, but I didn't put the yo. The reason I didn't is because diré is clear. It can only belong to I in that future tense. And as you get better at Spanish, you're going to get a feel when to keep the subject in and when to drop it. I want to show you another way to use the imperfect subjunctive conditional combo to give advice. This is the old, hey, if I were you, I would do something, right? We say this in English sometimes. And this construction still matches the verb tenses and moods that you're using in English. If I were you, I would retire. Si yo fuera tú, me jubilaría. So we have fuera, right? Imperfect subjunctive, first clause, and we have me jubilaría, which is in the conditional there. Jubilarse is a good verb for to retire. You could use retirarse is another one. Jubilarse is more like you're going to retire and then get some kind of pension, You're going to get some payment. You're not just quitting. Here's another one. If I were you, I would tell the police the truth. Si yo fuera tú, le diría la verdad a la policía. Si yo fuera tú, le diría la verdad a la policía. And if you see somebody about to make a big mistake, you can just fall back on an easy one. Si yo fuera tú, no haría eso. If I were you, I wouldn't do that. Si yo fuera tú, no haría eso. That's not too tough, right? Well, I encourage you to go give people advice all day long so you can practice that construction. I have one more construction for you before I head out for the day. Como si plus imperfect subjunctive. And this is as if something. Here's an example. Juan talks as if he were a lawyer. Juan habla como si fuera abogado. In that sentence, the first part of the sentence is actually in the present tense, and the part after como si is in the imperfect subjunctive. It will always be in the imperfect subjunctive. Still, these verb tenses, moods match English really well, and that's going to make it easier to use. Well, once you can actually conjugate into the imperfect subjunctive without taking long pauses. Oh, and the conditional too, right? If we're talking about hypothetical situations. All right, but let's get back to como si. The guy acts like he owns the company. El tipo actúa como si fuera el dueño de la compañía. So the first part we have present tense, right? That comes from actuar, which means to act or to behave like. There's a couple different definitions for that. And then after como si we have fuera again, which is the verb ser in the imperfect subjunctive. This is getting easier and easier, isn't it? So here's another one. Let's say you ask your friend, how do you feel? And they're like, oh, they don't feel good. I don't know, maybe they're sick, maybe they drank too much, whatever. And they say, I feel like I've been run over by a freight train. Now, you don't see as if I've been run over in there, but you could plug it in, right? This sentence is going to require that construction, our como si with the imperfect subjunctive. So let's translate that. How do you feel? ¿Cómo te sientes? ¿Cómo te sientes? I feel like I've been run over by a freight train. Me siento como si me hubiera atropellado un tren de carga. Me siento como si me hubiera atropellado un tren de carga. The closest translation would be, I feel as if a freight train had run me over, not that I had been run over by a freight train. Just to be clear, it's not in the passive voice. I know that last sentence was a little tough, and depending what your ability is in Spanish, you might have been like, I'm never going to get that. As you improve in Spanish, your sentences are going to get more complex and you're going to get better at it. Don't worry, you know, it's just one step at a time. Your goal should be just to be a little bit better at it than you were yesterday. And before you know it, you've really come a long way. So do you think you're going to be able to decide between the subjunctive and the indicative when you're creating sentences using if, si in the future? And I'm not talking about the future tense, I'm talking about the next time. You know, the subjunctive can be a tricky topic, but really the key to learning the subjunctive and how to use it correctly is to learn what kind of grammatical constructions specifically trigger it, and not to rely on that whole uncertainty definition to try to decide, you know, if you should use it or not, because that's really misleading. Well, that's my advice anyway. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something, and until next time, hasta luego.